Thank you everybody for coming and welcome to the South Kohala Coastal Partnership Speaker Series. I'm Lauren Krupita, the coordinator of the partnership, and the goal of this series is to provide an opportunity to learn more about the partners and the work being done in South Kohala, and to share a little bit about the history of the partnership. The catalyst that started this was that the State Division of Aquatic Resources and Coral Reef Working Group identified South Kohala as a priority area for the Hawaii Coral Reef Strategy to implement action to reduce anthropogenic impacts to our coral reefs. In 2018, over 30 organizations and agencies participated in creating the South Kohala Conservation and Coastal Action Plan 2030 that can be found on our website and outlines 6 specific strategies to guide the partnership's collaborative work toward restoring and protecting coastal resources. The partnership has a unique framework compared to watershed partnerships that focuses on specific landowners of an area. And this coastal partnership is open to all to participate, since no one owns the ocean and we all have a responsibility to work together to protect and manage our coastal resources. So today for our speaker series, we are excited to have Kawehi Young with the Big Island Invasive Species Committee. And Kawehi completed her bachelor's at Hilo and is also a graduate of the Tropical Conservation Biology and Environmental Science master's program. She started working with BIISC as a pipe intern after graduation, and then continued with BIISC as a year-long kupu intern, then worked her way full-time and now serves as the community engagement liaison. She is a South Kohala resident and will be presenting today on the coconut rhinoceros beetle.
Aloha mai kako, mahalo for the opportunity to be here today to talk to you folks about a particular invasive species that we've been focused on at BIISC recently. The coconut rhinoceros beetle is a really harmful invasive species. This really large black beetle is really hard to miss. It's native to Southeast Asia. It's a widespread pest across the Pacific. So CRB has invaded places like Guam, Palau, Fiji, Samoa, the Solomon Islands, and they go after palm trees. Now, I say that this beetle is big and it's hard to miss, but they're actually night active. So they're not really the best thing that we're trying to get people to look for. We're actually wanting them to look for the grubs. So the CRB, while as adults, they spend their time up in the tree, they lay their eggs in soil and compost that's on the ground. And so with our outreach efforts, we're really pushing this message of getting people to look for those grubs and look for the beetle in its developing stages. So here's a timeline for you. CRB was first detected on Oahu back in December of 2013. It was detected in Mamala Bay on Oahu. In 2017, the Mamalu Poi Poi program was started statewide, and this was an interagency collaboration and effort to really address the gaps in our inter-island biosecurity. And so the purpose of this program was to increase the surveillance and the monitoring for invasive pests like CRB and Africanized honeybees at our ports of entry. So back in 2017, we started by setting up these traps at the Hilo and Kona airports, and we've been on the lookout for CRB for many years now. Last year in June, the Kauai Invasive Species Committee actually caught 2 beetles in these traps that were set up close to the Lihue airport. And we were really on high alert because at this time, an interim rule that was regulating the movement of infested or CRB host material off of Oahu had just expired at this time. And so we were really scared about the possibility of CRB showing up on our island. And just a few months later, we received the first confirmation of CRB being on the Big Island. So a concerned Waikoloa resident came across grubs in her backyard and a decaying palm stump, and she reported that to HDOA, and it was since confirmed through DNA analysis that it was CRB. And just a month later, CRB was found on Maui. This time it was on a golf course. I believe it was an arborist who was hired to cut down a dying palm. He found 17 larvae in this tree. And I'm a visual person, so I like to show this graphic of the invasion curve. I think it does a really great job at illustrating just how important it is to invest resources into that prevention, early detection, and eradication. Um, and for us on the Big Island, we believe that we can eradicate CRB. We are early enough in this invasion that we feel like we do have a chance if we can really get folks to be vigilant and to report as early as possible. One thing I wanted to point out with this graphic is that orange bar. So when a species is starting to get more widespread across the island, it becomes harder to eradicate, and we eventually enter this this category of containment. Really, we can keep it in the areas, but we can't completely eliminate it from the area or from the island. And that's usually when the public is really aware about a situation and about the invasion. I think about it like in terms of little fire ants, right? It takes years for them to get so bad to where everybody's getting stung. And so in the case of CRB, we really want to sound the alarm and get the public aware before we hit this stage of containment. We really want this to be happening earlier, early on in the invasion. So that's why we are pushing a lot of outreach, and we're really trying to spread the message and get people out there and looking for CRB. So how do you identify CRB? The adult is pretty easy to distinguish with that large horn. But it is commonly mistaken for other scarab beetles that we have here. So I'll be going over that in a few slides. But these beetles are very large. They're about 2 inches long. They're pretty fuzzy underneath. And like I mentioned earlier, they're night active. The grubs are pale white. They have a large brown head capsule, and they can be many different sizes. They start off really small and they go through their developmental stages, and they reach up to 3 inches long. The CRB also curl into a C shape. Now, it's really important to point out that we have many other beetle species on our island. All beetles start their life as grubs. And so we don't want people automatically thinking, oh no, I have CRB, if they found a beetle in their garden, a beetle grub in their garden. So coconut rhinoceros beetles, they spend most of their life in that developmental stage, you know, growing from an egg until eventually pupating into an adult. And an average female can lay over 90 eggs in her lifetime. And so the reason why, especially in our outreach, we're pushing for people to be searching their compost and their mulch is because they spend many months in this stage, and it's important to catch them before they develop into that adult stage. Coconut rhinoceros beetles are commonly mistaken for another scarab beetle that we have in Hawaii that is extremely widespread, the oriental flower beetle, or OFB. So the OFB is fairly widespread on Hawaii Island. We've been receiving reports for these beetles for years now. And they are commonly mistaken for CRB because their grubs look so similar. One thing to point out is they have a roster line on their rear end. And that's one way you can distinguish between CRB and OFB is that roster line. Another characteristic is that the OFB, they crawl on their back. So their legs are up in the air and they kind of crawl on their back. Whereas the CRB, they crawl on their side. And so these are all little things that we want folks to be on the lookout for when they come across grubs in their garden. And on the bottom of this graphic, you can see how the CRB curls into the C shape as opposed to the OFB curling in that, tucking its head into that midsection. Now, I'm curious to see, after I went through that graphic, if you folks think you know what kind of grubs these are. It's really challenging, I think, especially because if someone is just sending in one picture, we can't always get a really good idea of what's going on. We can't really see that roster line. So this is a report that was sent to us a few weeks ago from a woman in Kona. And if you look really good on this, this grub here on the right, you can kind of make out that roster line, but it's really tough. And so when we followed up on this report, we asked to see if we could get pictures from different angles. And she had already destroyed the grubs. She said she threw them out into the roadway and they were run over by a car. And so I think something important that we'd like to share with people is, yes, take pictures and report it. But until you receive a response from us or you get that ID, don't destroy the grubs. Now, what about these grubs? They look pretty much the same. Again, really hard sometimes to tell. These are actually CRB in a jar, photographed on Oahu. Now I have a video now. It's interesting because this grub isn't crawling on its side. It's not crawling on its back. So we received this report from a resident in Waikoloa who was actually very close to that initial CRB detection. So we were stumped and we didn't know what it was. So we sent this off to our colleague at the USDA BIISC office in Hilo, and she ran DNA on this. And it turned back as Cyclocephala pasadinae. And so this is another scarab beetle that's been common in the Waikoloa area. It was a fairly recent introduction. I believe it was first detected in 2009 on the golf course. So it's a turf pest that's in Waikoloa. And so if you come across grubs, it's really important to take clear pictures from multiple different angles to really keep in mind that we're looking for these certain characteristics. And if you can get a video of its movement, that's even better. That really gives us a better idea of what species it may be. And sometimes we don't know what it is, and we have to submit it for DNA analysis. So whenever you submit a report, we ask that you contain the grubs in a sealed container and save them, because just in case we need to submit it to that lab in Hilo. Now, we really want folks to report to their local invasive species committee. I work on the social media for BIISC, so I'm always on Facebook, kind of scouring the different Facebook groups to see what the conversations are on different invasive species. And lately I've been seeing a lot of posts of grubs. And while there are really knowledgeable people on these Facebook groups, sometimes you can't always rely on the ID that someone gives you. A lot of these groups are statewide. And so if you post this and you're in Puna and someone in Oahu's like, yeah, they're everywhere, that's a CRB. It becomes really hard to have, that professional opinion, and it's hard to know what's going on because everything happening on each island is really different. Oahu is in a very different situation than we are here. They are not going to be able to eradicate CRB on Oahu. And at this point, the populations on Oahu have exploded. They're being seen up in the North Shore, on the west side, central Oahu. And so on Oahu, you see a lot more signs of this palm damage. One of the telltale signs of CRB are those 45-degree V cuts that come out from the midrib. So what happens is the adults, they fly into the trees and they try to find an area where they can burrow in. And they chew in these the leaves before they unfurl, and so when they open, they have these really weird cuts. And on the right hand side, you can see that they also have scalloped edges. So for your lolu palms and your fan palms, those patterns almost similar to like when you cut a paper snowflake is how I think about it. These beetles are chewing through, and then when the leaf opens, you see these interesting patterns. And of course, 2-inch boreholes. So a lot of residents on Oahu are seeing this damage. Here on the Big Island. We're so early on that we aren't seeing a lot of these signs of infestation yet. Now, CRB are not host specific. So while they prefer coconut trees, and that's a primary host species for them, they also go after fan palms, royal palms, date palms, and oil palms. And they also will go after other things like triangle palms, sago palms. In Oahu and areas where CRB are very prevalent and in high numbers, you see them going after things like sugarcane and banana, taro, pineapple, and hala. Last week, CTAR had a webinar on coconut rhinoceros beetle on Oahu, and in one of the slides, they had a picture of a CRB getting into a zucchini. So I mean, these guys are really really damaging and are a huge problem for our agricultural industry. Now, this picture really breaks my heart because it really shows how devastating these beetles can be, especially to our native endemic lolu palms. This is a picture I believe this was taken this year in Central Oahu at a nursery. And we have really special fan palms that aren't found anywhere in the world. And a lot of times our native species just aren't equipped to deal with these sorts of pests. They haven't evolved with them. And so we're really concerned for our lolu. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what BIISC is doing in response to CRB on our island. So back in October was when we had that first detection. And even back around when we heard about CRB hitting Kauai, we realized, oh no, we really got to get ready, and so we were able to use some grant funding and collaborate with Michelle Reynolds of Hawaii Detection Dogs to get a dog trained up and ready in anticipation for CRB getting to the Big Island. And so she's been training the dog and getting him ready to sniff out coconut rhinoceros beetle grubs. And so since that first introduction of the grubs, HDOA treated the stump. They removed the stump, and we went to the site back in December with the dog. The dog didn't have any alerts, so we're seeing that as a good sign. And just this month, we started up our palm surveys. So this is something that we typically have been doing annually to search for damage. And in past years, we've been focusing mainly at our harbors and our airports. But this year, we are surveying the whole Waikoloa village. And so far, we haven't seen anything indicative of CRB. So we take that as a good sign, but we're still on the lookout, and we are relying from reports from residents as well. We are working on setting up a widespread trapping network across the island. And of course, you know how large our island is. It's quite a task to get this network up and running. But we are really asking for folks, different organizations, community groups, and residents to consider hosting a trap in their property, especially if they have really special groves of palm trees and lolu that they want to protect. This trap uses a pheromone lure that lasts for 3 months. It's that little red little package here hanging that will attract the CRB if they're in the area. So this is not a tool for control. I want to make that really clear. We don't just set up these traps and it gets rid of the problem. This is just a tool for detection. It helps us to figure out, okay, the beetles are in this area. Let's focus our resources here. And so we are currently working to get these traps set up at all county parks. And if anyone is interested in setting up a trap on their property, please reach out to us and we can work on getting those out to you. Now, another vector and another way that the coconut rhinoceros beetle is moving is through bagged soil and mulch. And this is really scary. On Oahu, especially on these gardening Facebook groups, you see that it is so common for someone to go pick up a bag of soil or mulch, go and plant, use it in their garden, their potted plants, and then months later, they have CRB. And so this is a really large vector, and we're hoping to train Manu up so that we can do inspections of incoming mulch to our island. So that's something else that we're also working on. We're also developing UAV capabilities so that we can use the drones to get a better look at these trees when we do our palm surveys. It can be hard when you're on the ground looking up at a coconut tree and the sun is shining in your face and there's glare. It's just hard to get a good look at what's going on. So we're looking to use drones. We already have a field crew that's been licensed and that works with drones regularly. And so we're going to be using that for monitoring purposes as well as treatment. Now, what can you do? I would say the biggest thing is we need everyone to be vigilant. We need everyone to be on the lookout for suspect damage to trees as well as suspect grubs. So these grubs have been found in all kinds of different materials: mulch piles, decaying palm stumps, potted plants. We've heard reports of larvae moving in potted plants on Oahu, and that's really, really scary. Bagged mulch and soil, and even erosion socks. Yeah, and it's so important to take really great pictures. No blurry photos, please. We get a lot of blurry photos. And it makes it really hard for us to get a good ID. So really, when you come across a grub, really make sure that you're paying attention to those characteristics that I mentioned. How does it curl? How does it crawl? And does it have that raster line? So this picture is a really great example of an oriental flower beetle. It shows that raster line. Now, if you're hosting a trap, the thing with our trapping program, there's just so much area to cover that we physically, our crews can't check each trap. So we're really hoping that everyone else can help us out with this. It doesn't take much. It takes a few minutes to check your trap once a month. You just peer in, look in that white little cup to see if there's a beetle. You fill out this short little Google form, and that's it. Now, a lot of people may be wondering, why does this keep happening? And how is it that these beetles just after 10 years showed up on Kauai and then the Big Island and then Maui? And really, I think the issue is that we don't have strong biosecurity. We need better laws. And so this QR code, if you folks are interested, takes you to the invasive species bills that are being tracked currently in the 2024 legislative session. This list was put together by the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, and I think it's a great resource. So I encourage you to check it out and see what sorts of bills are moving through the legislature. There was a study done in 2015 by the USDA Forest Service that found that one new insect arrives in Hawaii each day. And roughly 17 of those will survive long enough to establish in our islands. Now, that doesn't mean that all 17 are going to be an issue. Typically 10 to 15% of introduced species become invasive. And live plant imports were identified as that #1 pathway. And so we really need better regulations on things that are moving between our islands. And yeah, that's all I had. This is our contact information. If you folks are interested in hosting a trap on your property, please reach out to us. We are also on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, as well as YouTube.